We've already mentioned the importance of recognizable patterns in music. They make it easier to understand, and they also allow the composer to create expectations and then play with them. Motives are the smallest patterns used in music. While normally one note is not a motive, if it has a distinctive shape or is part of a recognizable rhythm, it can become one. For example, a long note played forte piano, followed by a crescendo, could be used as a motive. Here the dynamic shape is the motive, not the single pitch. The important thing to focus on with motives is what makes the motive special. A simple scale and even note values and all in one dynamic is nothing special. But add some kind of distinctive rhythm or timbre change and it could become a real motive. Compare these two scales. The first is neutral, but the second has a more distinctive character due to the repeated dotted note rhythm. In fact, the rhythm is the real motive here. Real motives are like questions. They need follow-up, some kind of answer. That's why neutral patterns, like the even note scale above, don't work very well as motives. They don't create any particular curiosity or suspense. Once there's something recognizable about a motive that attracts our attention, we can use it repeatedly and the listener will recognize it. There's a limit on how many motives we can pay attention to at a time. Listen to this line. The problem here is that there are so many patterns in such a short time that we lose track of them. The result just sounds chaotic. We can't develop any meaningful expectations from them, so we just lose interest. But one or two motives allow for many kinds of development. Of course, just repeating a motive exactly would get very boring. But we can transform a motive in various ways to maintain interest and still maintain the advantage it gives us. Obvious transformations include transposition, slight changes in contour, and extension, and usually inversion. Here are examples. At number 1, I've just transposed the motive up a step. Number 2, I've changed the leap between the third and fourth notes from a third to a fourth. At number 3, I've changed the leap between the second and third notes from a seventh to a sixth. As we can see here, changing a leap to another leap usually doesn't attract much attention, as long as it makes harmonic sense. Changing a step to a leap can be sometimes more of a problem. Of course, if the main characteristic feature of the motive is the rhythm, like at the dotted note scale above, it will be less of a problem. At number 4, I've simply repeated the last part of the motive, extending it. At number 5, I've inverted the same motive. Whenever the original went up, now it goes down by the same amount, and vice versa. These are all very common motivic transformations that allow us to vary the musical line enough to maintain, but not so much as to ruin its coherence. There are other, more far-flung changes possible, but it's very important to ask yourself whether the listener will still recognize the motive. For example, many counterpoint books talk about retrograde and retrograde inversion as common transformations. But listen to this. Do you really recognize the second version as being a variant of the first? And if you heard it 5 minutes later in the piece, would you recognize it? Notice that some transformations, like this retrograde inversion, can be easy to see, but that doesn't mean they're easy to hear. So, motivic transformations can be classed as close or more distant. Close variants are useful for extending a line in a coherent way. Distant variants, if they're not easily recognized by ear, should be used with caution. Sometimes the composer will use them as material for two different sections of a piece. Often we see what I call double motives, like this one from Bach's G minor fugue in the Well-Tempered Clavier. The advantage of a double motive like this is that there are even more possibilities for developing it. We could develop the theme in the ways we explained above, but we could also develop only one of the two motives for a while, giving the other one a rest, or alternate between them, but not always in the original order. The result can be very rich indeed, while still remaining coherent. This covers the standard ways we can use motives. A motive is a simple but very powerful way to give music a strong character, and the close variants we've looked at above still allow for lots of development. We mentioned earlier the case of neutral lines, not so strongly characteristic. Not every note in a melodic line has to be derived from the main motive or motives. In particular, little bits of neutral scale figures or common suspensions are often inserted to a motivic line. As long as they are not too characteristic in themselves, they can serve to let the line breathe or to allow another line or contrapuntal texture to emerge. Here's an example. Already in the second bar, the top part is reduced to longer note suspensions to allow the lower part to emerge with the main motive. And the second half of the third bar, the left hand is in simple eighth notes. This makes better accompaniment than just having both hands do the same rhythm. The following bar again includes the suspension, and the last bar briefly has both hands doing the daughter note rhythm. To sum up, the important things to remember about motives are how they contribute to musical character and how to develop them in ways that are audibly coherent.